The wind had picked up just before sunset, howling through the trees behind Jim's cabin like a warning. He thought he was used to the silence out here. It was why he moved after the funeral. But tonight, the stillness felt different, like something was about to break. Then came the barking, sharp, desperate, and growing closer. Jim hadn't seen the dog before. No collar, ribs showing, eyes wild with urgency. It didn't bark at him, though it barked past him, toward the woods, then looked back. Again and again, like it was trying to speak. Jim stood frozen on his porch, coffee cooling in his hand, unsure whether to follow or shut the door. 3 months ago, he buried his wife of 42 years. Since then, the days melted into each other, each one quieter than the last. He spoke to her sometimes, her picture on the mantel, just to fill the air. The loneliness was manageable during the day, but the nights, they clawed at him. The dog was pacing now, whining, running a few steps into the trees before returning. It wasn't just lost, it was leading him somewhere. Jim set the mug down, grabbed his coat from the hook. "What the hell are you trying to show me?" he muttered, heart pounding harder than it had in weeks. The forest behind the cabin had always felt like a border between him and the world. Since Marlene died, he hadn't gone more than a few yards in. Now with this ragged creature as his guide, he crossed that invisible line. The cold bit through his sleeves and the shadows swallowed his boots. Branches snapped underfoot. The barking had stopped, replaced by a low, urgent whine. Jim's flashlight beam wobbled as he moved deeper, heart racing. He could hear something else now, something softer, not animal, human. Was that crying? He paused near a fallen tree, squinting into the darkness. The dog circled the trunk, nose low, tail stiff. Then, with a short bark, it vanished into the underbrush. Jim pushed through, leaves wet and clinging to his jeans, breath catching on the cold air. There was a shape at the base of the tree, small, curled, not moving. Jim stumbled forward, nearly tripping. His light fell on a little girl, no older than 8, shivering, her lips blue, her arms wrapped around a backpack. Her eyes blinked up slowly at him. For a second, all he could do was stare. What was a child doing out here, alone in the woods at night? He turned to the dog, who now sat beside her, chest heaving but calm. Jim looked back down, pulse roaring in his ears. "You're okay now," he whispered. "I've got you." The girl didn't speak, just leaned into him when he scooped her up, her body light as a memory. The dog trotted ahead, stopping every few steps to wait. As they made their way back through the dark, Jim felt something shift in his chest, something cracking open. Inside the cabin, the heat blasted from the vents as Jim wrapped the girl in every blanket he could find. She was still silent, eyes fixed on the fireplace, fingers clutching the backpack like a lifeline. He knelt beside her, unsure what to say, unsure if she could even hear him. The dog sat protectively at her feet, never looking away. Jim tried calling 911, but the signal out here was always patchy. The call dropped twice before he could give a full location. He slammed the phone down, frustrated and scared. The girl coughed dry and weak, and he rushed to pour her a glass of water, hands shaking. He didn't ask questions yet. She was clearly in shock, and pushing wouldn't help. Instead, he moved slowly, narrating his actions like he used to when Marlene was sick. "Here's some soup. Careful. It's hot. You're safe now." The dog watched every move with quiet intensity. Later, when she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "Her name's Lucy." Jim looked around, confused. "The dog?" The girl nodded. "She found me." He felt a lump rise in his throat, but forced himself to stay calm. "Lucy's a good girl," he said. "She really is." He examined the dog more closely now. She was older than she first seemed, fur matted and paws raw from travel. Her ribs pressed against her skin like branches under snow. Jim realized Lucy had probably gone miles to find anyone to help this child. There was a deep scratch along Lucy's shoulder. Old blood crusted into the fur, the wound swollen. Jim winced. He knew she needed care too, but the vet was in town, over 30 minutes away. "I can't drive at night," he murmured, looking from the girl to the dog, torn. Outside, the wind picked up again. Trees creaked like old bones, and the snow started to fall. Leaving now could mean getting stranded, or worse. But staying meant risking infection in Lucy's wound and the girl's worsening condition. Jim stared out the window, jaw clenched. He opened the old trunk by the door, the one filled with supplies he'd avoided since Marlene passed. Inside were her emergency kits, her notes, her care guides from her nursing days. "You always knew what to do," he whispered. "Help me now." With trembling hands, he cleaned Lucy's wound the way he'd once cleaned Marlene's foresight. Slow, steady, apologizing with every dab of peroxide. The dog flinched but didn't move, her eyes locked on his like she understood. The girl watched from the couch, tears now tracking down her cheeks. As he bandaged the wound, something settled in him, a quiet clarity. This wasn't just chance. This dog didn't just find him. She chose him, and now he had to choose back. He looked at them both, the girl and the dog, and said, "You're not alone anymore. Neither of you." By morning, the snow had stopped, blanketing the woods in silence and light. The girl was asleep on the couch, Lucy curled tightly beside her like a guardian angel with fur. Jim brewed coffee, staring out the frosted window, heart heavier and fuller than it had been in months. He didn't know their full story, but he knew he was part of it now. When the sheriff finally arrived, escorted by a local MT, Jim explained what happened with a steady voice. The girl, her name was Emily, had been missing for 2 days after running from a foster home. Lucy had been with her the whole time. "It's a miracle she found you," the deputy said. "Most folks wouldn't have made it out here." Emily didn't want to let go of Lucy even as the M checked her over. "They won't let me keep her," she whispered. "They always say no dogs." Jim knelt beside her, hands on her shoulders. "Then she stays here," he said, "till we figure it out. Both of you do." The Empt nodded silent, moved. The sheriff looked at Jim with quiet respect. "You sure you're up for this?" Jim glanced at the dog, then at Emily, who clung to Lucy like her life depended on it. "I buried my wife alone," he said plainly. "I won't bury this second chance." As they left, the cabin felt different. Not just warmer, alive. Emily helped brush Lucy's fur, laughing softly when the dog licked her face. Jim found himself smiling without guilt for the first time in months. He didn't say it out loud, but he felt it. "Thank you, Marlene." Each day brought small milestones. Lucy's limp faded. Emily began to eat more. She started talking in full sentences, then asking questions about the forest, about Jim's tools, about Marlene's picture above the fireplace. Jim answered everything with gentle honesty. Word spread through the small town about what happened. The grocery clerk slipped in extra dog treats for Lucy. A retired teacher dropped off children's books. Even the woman from the diner, the one who'd always sat alone, brought over blankets and a pie. The community had seen Jim grieve. Now they saw him heal. There was pushback too. Social services wanted to place Emily in another foster home. "He's not family," one official said. "He's a grieving old man with a dog and a cabin." But then Lucy intervened again. Literally. During the visit, she wouldn't leave the social worker alone until she sat and truly listened to Emily. Emily told her story through Lucy. "She kept me warm. She kept me safe. She made me walk when I didn't want to." The woman's expression softened. "You think Jim's like Lucy?" she asked. Emily nodded. "He found me when no one else was looking." It wasn't official yet, but the tone had changed. The words temporary guardianship were whispered. And one afternoon, as Jim and Emily watched Lucy chase falling leaves in the yard, she turned to him and asked, "Can we stay a family, even if we weren't born that way?" Jim didn't hesitate. "We already are." Spring came slowly, melting the snow and softening the ground where Marlene's roses used to grow. Jim and Emily planted new ones, pink like Marlene liked, while Lucy napped nearby, her head resting on a worn boot. The cabin, once silent and cold, now echoed with laughter, footsteps, and the occasional bark. Emily had her own room now, painted pale yellow with drawings of forests and dogs taped to the walls. She insisted on feeding Lucy every morning, brushing her coat with care, whispering secrets only the dog would understand. Jim found purpose again in the rhythm of their days, fixing breakfast, walking the trail, telling stories by the fire. Lucy's recovery was nothing short of remarkable. Her fur had grown back thick and shiny, her eyes brighter than ever. The vet, after one visit, simply said, "She was holding on for someone. Now she's home." Jim nodded quietly. He understood that kind of holding on. Neighbors began stopping by more often. Some brought supplies. Others just sat on the porch to share coffee and stories. One man, a veteran, who rarely spoke, left a hand-carved wooden sign at the gate. It read, "Safe Haven." Jim nailed it in place with quiet pride. Emily began attending the small school in town. She made friends quickly, always drawing Lucy when asked to draw someone important. Jim watched from the truck each morning as she walked in, backpack bouncing, hand waving. She was no longer the girl from the woods. She was Emily James, the girl with the dog. Lucy became more than just a pet. She became a local legend. The school invited her in for Hero Day. The sheriff told her story at a town fundraiser. Jim never sought attention, but he smiled every time someone said, "She saved that girl," because he knew she'd saved him too. Every Sunday they visited Marlene's grave, where Emily would leave a stone or flower. "She helped you help us," she'd say. Holding Jim's hand, Lucy would sit quietly by the headstone, ears perked, as if listening for a voice only she could hear. One evening, Jim found Emily and Lucy curled up on the couch, both fast asleep. The fireplace crackled, softly. He sat nearby watching them and whispered, "You didn't just bark at nothing, girl. You called me back to life." A tear rolled down his cheek, but this time it was warm. There were still hard days. The pain of loss never vanished completely, but it no longer hollowed him out. It made room for new love, new purpose, and quiet redemption. Jim had found something he didn't know he was missing. Someone who needed him as he was. He didn't just take in a stray dog. He didn't just rescue a lost girl. He opened his door and his heart, when it would have been easier to stay closed. In doing so, he didn't just save them. He saved himself.